All right, let's talk Plato. Not that Plato. That Plato. It's the worst dad joke ever. All right, Plato, major heavy hitter in philosophy. In fact, Alfred North Whitehead, who's a really important 20th century philosopher, said all of Western philosophy is just a footnote to Plato. So Plato's a big deal. Plato was a student of Socrates for many years. He was also Aristotle's teacher for many years. I think something like 20 years Aristotle studied under Plato. And everything, or most everything we know about Socrates, of course, is coming to us from Plato, because Socrates never wrote any of his own ideas down. Instead, Plato wrote these series of dialogues where Socrates is always featured as the main conversant, the main person in these conversations that he's having with various people in Athens. And one question we probably can't answer is how much of what Socrates is purported to have said in Plato's dialogues is actually representative of Socrates' thought, and how much of it is representative of Plato's thought. Is Plato using the mouthpiece of, or the Socrates is kind of his mouthpiece? Because over time, Socrates kind of changes his nature in Plato's dialogues, and it's, raises the question, is this because Socrates changed over time, or is this because Plato changed over time, and we're just seeing that reflected? Plato founded the Academy, so we can thank Plato for academics, for academia. He founded the Academy. It was on a sort of quasi-sacred site outside of the city walls in Athens. And in the Academy, folks would come by and they would do philosophy, and they would have conversations with one another. They would research. They would do physical exercises at the Academy. They would do sometimes some religious activities at the Academy. Kind of like a lot of the things we do in our universities and colleges today. The Academy didn't have a set curriculum like we have in our colleges and universities. Instead, they focused on this method, the method that we talked about earlier, the Socratic method, this idea that we're going to locate problems and then we're going to inquire through the use of dialectic. In other words, we're going to have these back and forth conversations with one another and try to find where the ideas don't hold together very well, and then try to figure out ways to make the ideas hold together better. So now we're going to read another excerpt from Plato's Republic. It's probably the most famous excerpt from that book, called The Allegory of the Cave. So you remember earlier we read the dialectic between Thrasymachus and Socrates, where they're talking about what is the nature of justice. Well, now in this excerpt, Plato's talking to another person named Glaucon. I think it's Glaucon. And Plato's trying to explain a process of becoming enlightened, okay? And he's going to do so by explaining what it would be like if you had spent your whole life kind of locked in a cave, never having any experience of the real world, and then slowly making this sort of painful journey up out of the cave into the real world. Now, a couple of things. You're going to see that this allegory, it's short, but you're going to see that just like the conversation with Thrasymachus, this is a dialogue. So Socrates speaks, and then I think it's Glaucon, the conversation partner speaks. I strongly encourage you to read this out loud. It'll make it much easier for you to understand what's going on if you're actually recreating this as a conversation between two people, and it allows your ears to kind of pick up on what's going on and help you interpret. I would recommend on the first read, just try to understand what's literally going on, okay? Like what's literally going on. Treat this as this really is a story about some person who's been chained up in a cave his whole life, and he gets out of that cave eventually. And just see if you can follow that progress. Then maybe give it another read and think about, okay, if this is an allegory, in other words, if this is a story that is supposed to illustrate something other than a literal sequence of events, what's it really about? What's the cave and this journey representing? All right, and see if you can come up with some answers to that question yourself. And then in some of the following video lectures, I'll walk you through a couple of different ways of interpreting the allegorical nature of this story. Okay, so enjoy. It's a really famous excerpt. And so now, once again, you're going to have something you can brag about at your fancy cocktail parties.